The 2020 presidential election is like no other, as America hasn't voted in a pandemic since 1918. This puts issues like public health to the forefront of people's minds.
I think public health is always inescapably, at some level, political, but the science has been politicized more than usual. And so I think the uncertainty around the election is sort of feeding into the uncertain people's sort of own uncertainty about their health, economic questions and unemployment and so on.
According to a Pew Research poll, the top issues in this election for Trump supporters are the economy and violent crime, while Biden supporters' top issues are healthcare and the coronavirus outbreak.
Biden's focus on kind of how people are hurting and suffering, Trump's focus on kind of the economy, we have to reopen things and, get back to the best economy that we ever had sort of comments.
Differing attitudes also apply to voters as they decide how to safely cast their ballot.
It seems like a lot of people have tried to vote early to avoid, the potential for longer waits and more potential disease exposure on election day.
Now, polling places work to adapt to CDC guidelines to keep voters and poll workers safe.
Is that they want to keep the lines outside. They don't want to cluster everyone inside, which would be the way that under normal circumstances, if people were uncomfortable with kind of the political activities going on outside, you might be able to move everyone kind of inside and cluster them in a big room, but you don't want to do that during the pandemic.
How voters prefer to cast their ballots differs heavily between Trump and Biden supporters. A Pew Research Center poll says 80% of registered voters supporting Trump prefer to vote in person, whereas 58% of registered voters supporting Biden prefer to vote by mail. So what exactly does the risk of virus transmission look like at these polling sites?
I think they're doing a pretty good job, especially when you get a bunch of people that are, kind of constantly streaming in and out and everything like that. It's kind of hard to keep the social distancing really totally consistent, but they're doing a good job of it, especially when you get into the voting area.
Despite COVID precautions, people are hesitant to show up to the polls.
It appears that concerns about in-person voting are really driving some of the early voting and vote by mail.
Michael Chikowitz says he voted in person because he doesn't trust the Postal Service or the president.
I just don't trust him to do the right thing and, get the Postal Service running smoothly for this election.
Some people don't have a choice.
I personally didn't get my absentee ballot in time, so I had to come and switch my voter registration to Illinois to vote in person. So it might turn out in less people voting, but hopefully not.
Others play it safe.
I also voted by mail, and it was the first time that I've done so. I've always voted in person. There are simply people in public office who really aren't interested in making voting safe.
Do you think the pandemic is making it harder or easier for people to vote?
Well, I certainly think it's making it harder. It's making it more difficult. It's making it more dangerous. But I think people are also then confronting that with renewed determination to challenge these unfair and undemocratic measures and policies. So I don't necessarily think it will work, but it does expose everyone to greater risk.
Allen says when people look at what President Trump has done with the pandemic,
it seems as though more and more Americans are unsatisfied with his handling. But, there's always going to be, with President Trump, a kind of fiercely loyal base that, kind of defends him and supports him almost no matter what happens.
Time is ticking as we await the results of one of the most unconventional elections in history. Lindsay Tanney, Northwestern News Network.